Hey there. I've had a couple of viewers ask to see more of my personal collection, and frankly, just about everything I've ever had that's of interest I've already put up on the channel. But I think maybe they meant, see my knives more all at once. So what I thought I would do is show part of the core of my collection, which is the evolution of the Swiss Officer's knife, the Victorinox Officer's knife. And I decided early on when I started collecting these knives that, with all the different models Victorinox and Wenger have had through the years and all the different changes, there was just no way ever that I could collect all those knives. And so I needed to have a theme and be a little more focused. And what I wanted to do was put together a collection that kind of told a story or might be of interest to people that maybe don't, just collect all the different models. And so basically what I did was I came across this book. It's The Knife and Its History. It's the book that Victorinox published in 1984 on the occasion of their 100th anniversary, the company's 100th anniversary. And in the book was an image that was really my inspiration for my collection. This is a picture of the evolution of the Swiss soldier's knife, which is the original Swiss Army knife, and then the Victorinox Officer's model, as shown with a standard kind of two-layer, six-tool model, like the standard of the Spartan through time. So, I started off collecting soldier knives, and I've been able to collect each of these major types. And so I've started working on this side of the page. And I've been able to collect everything except for the very first one, the original officer's knife from 1897. But recently I did get a model 1909, and I've been able to fill out the rest of this, plus a few more, so that's what I wanted to show you today. And if you've watched this channel, you've probably seen each and every one of these knives, but this is my soldier's collection. That would be the column there on the left in that picture. And I've been able to get every major type or model change through the years, including the 2008, which is the most modern one. It's just not in the case here. But I do have the 1890. That was the very first Swiss Army knife, and that's a very rare knife. So I do have all the different soldiers, but that's old news. If you watch the channel, you've seen and videos on all those. So just to start with this, again, I don't have the 1897, but I do have a model 1909. And this knife is very similar to the 1897, the original model, in that it has a brownish wood fiber scales. This one has 4 pins like the original one. This one does have a shield. That was the change in 1909, which makes this a type 1909. When I say model, if I say model, I just mean like a type change. These are all like Spartans, and with the exception of this one. But they're all a 2-layer, 6-tool knife, generally known as a Spartan. I don't think Victorinox started using that name maybe until the 70s. But to me, the difference between a Spartan and a standard is standards usually don't have a key ring or bail. But these are Spartans, mostly with no toothpicks or tweezers. And the earlier versions of Spartans often did not come with toothpicks and tweezers. But anyway, back to this knife. In 1909, on the 25th anniversary of the company, they had a little 25th year jubilee. They started putting this Swiss cross and shield. It's kind of become known as the Victorinox shield on the knives. And that was done as just recognition of the company's first 25 years in existence. And also Carl Elsner wanted to do that because there were a lot of knockoffs coming in from Germany at the time, and he wanted to distinguish his knives, as Swiss engineered knives from those German knives. But this has the original style can opener that you see on the soldier knives. It also has the original screwdriver with no cap lifter. The officer's knife was a departure from the soldier's knife. It was lighter, more elegant, but they also introduced a small blade on it. And they originally called this the erasing blade because officers would do paperwork with pen and paper, and if they made a mistake, they could scrape the paper to erase their mistake with this blade. Now, this is not a Spartan. It's not a 2-layer knife. It's actually a 3-layer knife, and it has a saw. Carl Elsner started putting other tools like saws and scissors on his knives in 1902. And so this one actually is not a Spartan. But that's okay. It was the one I could find, and it's in great shape. I've not really done anything to this knife other than just some light cleaning. It honestly looks like it was never used or used hard at all. It's just old, but in great shape. And as I mentioned, it does have 4 pins, like the 1897 models. Some of the later 1909 types don't have these 4 pins. They've got 3 pins. This knife has the old exposed tetrahedral awl, which was used for punching holes in leather. There's a lot of leather back then. They worked with boots and bridles and saddles and things like that. This has a 5-turn corkscrew. The idea was the officer might need to entertain and open some bottles of wine, so they introduced a corkscrew on these knives in addition to the soldier knives. The big revolutionary idea or innovation of these knives was they hung the back tools off the same springs that the front tools worked off of. So you got 6 tools off of 2 springs. That hadn't been done before. I don't know what type of liner that is. I guess it's a type of nickel silver, although it looks less shiny and a little thicker than some of the nickel silver examples that I have from later. All of my knives have a bail, which is nice. In the picture I showed you there, none of them had a bail except for the very last one where they wanted to show, you know, the shackle or bail turning to the key ring. The main blade on this one is in really good shape. Now this knife I think is stainless steel. It's got some staining on it because it's old, but it does not appear to be carbon steel. And because of that, I would date it after 1923. So the differences between this knife and the one I don't have would be has a shield and it has stainless steel tools as opposed to carbon steel. And an additional tool like the saw. But let's take a look at the tang stamps as we go through these, if I can get some focusing going on here. But this one reads Elsener Swiss. And Elsener was Carl Elsener's last name. Swiss was the canton which he operated in Switzerland. And this is the first tang stamp you see on these knives. There were 2 versions of it. There was a block lettering straight up and down and block lettering slanted like this. And there's nothing else on the other side of the knife, just a blank tang there. So I think that's everything I want to say about that knife. And yeah, I just recently was able to get that. It was very hard to get, particularly in that condition, and that kind of spurred me on to fill this out a little bit. The next knife is what I call Type 1937, because it was a big change in 1937. They moved away from the wood fiber scales to the red Celador plastic scales. And so now you have, you know, what we know today as kind of the iconic little red knife. You'll notice this one still has the old style can opener, but the screwdriver now has a cap lifter. That was introduced in 1942, so this knife is post 1942. Still has the 3-sided exposed awl, 5-turn grooved corkscrew, but now they've introduced a groove. And you know, I always thought the old ones always had a decorative groove, but you'll notice in this one they did not have the decorative groove. So that was something that was introduced and then much later dropped again. This knife has brass liners, which is a little unusual. And my understanding of that is, on some of the earlier ones, that was kind of like a luxury upgrade you could get. Brass liners and brass pins on this one. Nickel silver shield. The shield's changed a little bit. It's a slight change, but you'll notice it's bigger, and the cross in the outline is now connected. Still has a clip point small blade. The main blade now reads Elsener Swiss made, and they've introduced a new tang stamp on the back here, inoxide, which is short for inoxydable, a French term for stainless steel. So they started stamping that on the knives to show that they were stainless steel. And that's the crossbow right there. Crossbow is a very important symbol in Swiss history. Ties into William Tell and a lot of other things. This knife was probably the worst shape of all of them when I got it. It looks pretty good now, but I had to put a tremendous amount of work in on it. It does have obviously a handle repair here, but I'm glad to have it because they are difficult to get, and it's got the brass liners, so I think that's kind of special. All right, next up is what I call Type 1946, and this was a change that Victorinox highlights in that picture. I guess they felt it was pretty important. They often will highlight their changes by can opener type. So this can opener was introduced in 1946. I call it the lobster claw style can opener. I can't remember where I read that. But they didn't have it for very long because in 1951 they patented a new can opener and brought that out. But eventually, years later, when the patent ran out on this, I guess, Wenger started using it. Wenger used it for a very long time. You still have the pretty much the same screwdriver cap lifter here. Same clip point blade, small blade. The large blade now has a tang stamp on this one. There were different tang stamps, but this one's kind of common on a 1946 type. Armee Swiss, A-R-M-E-E, Swiss, S-U-I-S-S-E with the Swiss cross. And now on the other side, Victorinox Switzerland Stainless. So you start to see that Victorinox name. Still has exposed rivets, exposed awl, 5-turn groove corkscrew. This one does have nickel silver liners, and as you can see on this model knife, they're much thinner. They seem kind of shinier and thinner than they do on the original one that I have there, or not the original, but the 1909 version. I've not done anything to this knife. When I bought it, I paid up for it because it was virtually new looking. Which I find remarkable for this age of a knife. But this knife looks like it basically was just put in a drawer somewhere all those years. Just a little light cleaning and it's in this state. And then in 1951 we had some changes. We still have a bail, you see, exposed rivets, a nickel silver shield, exposed awl, 5-turn groove corkscrew, all that's the same. But now Victorinox has moved to a new material, aluminum liners, makes the knife lighter. A little probably less strong, I think. They also brought out the new patented can opener in reversed positions. They put the can opener where the screwdriver was and the screwdriver cap lifter where the can opener was. So you can see it's a Swiss patent on that. And this is the style they still use today. And here is the screwdriver cap lifter. It now gets a sharpened edge on the inside here for stripping cables and a wire stripper or bending notch here. This knife also was a real peach. I didn't really do much of anything to it. It looks virtually new. The only thing is it doesn't have a lot of snap on like some of the tools. That's kind of common on the can opener for some reason. But that's a beautiful knife. I'm really happy to have it. Had to upgrade a couple times to get them in this condition. This is what I call the 1961 type. Now you see that the rivets are hidden. You still have a bail or a shackle. That was optional. Not all the knives came with that. But just look at some of the other tools. Same can opener. Still has the Swiss patent markings on it. Same screwdriver cap lifter. We still have a clip point small blade. The larger blade now has a tang stamp. Might have missed it on the other one, but it's Victoria Officier Swiss. Well, sorry about that, and I can't really get the focus to cooperate, but on this side it says Victorinox Switzerland Stainless Rost Fry. There we go. Still have a 5-turn groove corkscrew, but now instead of exposed awl, we have a kind of a hidden flat-sided sharpened reamer, and it has no sewing eye like today's model. Let me back up, take a look at the tang stamp on this 1951 model. I believe it's the same as the one I just showed you. This is where you first see Victoria, in my collection anyway, Officier Swiss with the crossbow, and then Victorinox Switzerland Stainless Rost Fry. They kept that tang stamp for quite a while. And then in 1968, Victorinox started phasing out the shackle or the bail and moving to the keyring. It was attached to a separate spacer on the back. Hidden rivets. These are the kind of pop-on scales like we're used to today. There's the can opener, no longer says Swiss patent. Here is the screwdriver cap lifter. It's still sharpened on the inside. Still have a clip point blade. What I did was I got a knife that was basically identical to this one, except the keyring instead of a shackle, so I wanted to show that change. The large blade again reads Victoria Officer Swiss, but on this side, instead of Victorinox, it reads Hofritz, Switzerland Stainless. Hofritz was an American distributor for Victorinox knives for a long time, one of the top sellers. And so they got their own tank stamp. Oftentimes you'll see that name either on the handle or scales too. 5-turn groove corkscrew, same type of sharpened reamer and a sewing eye. And then in 1973, they moved away from the the clip point small blade, went to a spear point small blade. So I think that's a pretty major change, and I kind of included that. These two knives here really aren't in that picture I showed you. I added them just to try to modernize or bring that picture up to date because that picture was taken in 1984. We no longer have a sharpened cap lifter at this point. And the main blade on this one simply reads Officier Swiss, but it still has a crossbow and a cross. Okay, there we go. And on the other side, Victorinox Switzerland Stainless Rostfrei, German term for stainless. Hidden rivets, keyring. We're now down to a 4-turn corkscrew, but it's still grooved. The reamer still has no sewing eye at this point. And then what you have here finally is what you have today. This is a, I believe, a 2012 Spartan. Now you'll notice it has scale tools. You can't get a Spartan now without toothpicks or tweezers. Once upon a time you could. But again, since it's got the key ring and this one has the key ring, I wouldn't call them standards. So that's kind of, I guess, open to interpretation. But here, you know, you've got the same type of can opener. They're still using that. You've got a 90-degree stop now on the unsharpened screwdriver cap lifter. The spear point small blade. The main blade now just simply reads Officier Swiss. There's no more crossbow or cross. I believe that was started in 2005. And Victorinox Swiss-made stainless, which is a change. On the back, you've got 4-turn non-grooved corkscrew, and you have a reamer with a sewing eye. They began to put that sewing eye on the knives in 1985, and they dropped the grooved corkscrew in 91. Aluminum liners. This one you'll notice has a serial number on the liner in there because it's one of the 2012 115-year limited edition ones. Not exactly rare or valuable, but I just thought it was kind of interesting to put that in as a modern example. Alright, well that's a rundown of the Victorinox Swiss Officer's knife, almost from the beginning through modern times. And if you collect these, I hope you found that interesting. If you're just trying to date your knife, maybe there was some good information for you in there. But what this box and the soldier knife box I showed you earlier represents is a lot of work on my part. It may not be that many knives, but I've bought and sold and traded and upgraded a lot of knives to get to this point. So yeah. Thanks for watching, and have fun collecting.